Good morning. This morning we are going to read Stein. She is a very important figure, but more important is what is more important is she played a key role in building a 20th century literature. She played an important role in the art and literary world of the last century in Paris. And Paris was the global center of the last century in 20th century arts and literature. All the important figures gathered in Paris, and also all the people, all the major artists and writers gathered in his home in Paris, including Yeats, William Butler Yeats, and John Synge. John Synge, I don't think she came to her house. James Joyce, Samuel Beckett, Hemingway, Wallace Stevens, William Carlos Williams. They are the best writers, right? And among them, there was Picasso, Pablo Picasso, of course. Picasso had just arrived in Paris in the early 1900s, and he was a regular visitor. Today, she is remembered as a patron of the last century writers and artists. But I think she is an important figure herself. And this morning we are going to read a poetry. Actually, it's called novella, short novel, entitled Tender Buttons. And it's very interesting, but it is shocking for you to read that kind of piece of literary work. But the reaction was the same. But some of the important figures, important writers, including William Carlos Williams, recognized this work as an important piece. And she received favorable reception. Of course, there was criticism. So now we are going to look at what she is and what she has done in Paris. Okay? This is her house. The gathering in the Stein home brought together influences of talent and thinking that would help define modernist literature and art. Dedicated attendees, visitors, included Pablo Picasso, Ernest Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Sinclair Lewis, James Joyce. James Joyce is the most important figure, probably the best writer of the last century. And Ezra Pound, she was the patron of many important figures, right? And Ezra Pound served as personal history to William Butler Yeats, right? Thornton Wilder, Shirley Anderson, novelist, Francis, Francis Picabia, and Carl Van Vechten. He was the critic, and Henri Matisse, Picasso and Matisse, right? Matisse. Saturday evenings had been set as the fixed day and time for formal congregation, so that she could work at the writing, uninterrupted by impromptu visitors. It was Stein's painter, partner Alice. She was homosexual, lesbian, who became the de facto hostess for the wives and girlfriends of the artist in attendance, who met in a separate room. Upon the birth of his son, frequent attendee Hemingway asked Stein to be the godmother of her child, of his child. During the summer of 1931, Stein advised the young composer and writer Paul Bowles to go to Tangier, where she and Alice had vacationed. Okay. Among Picasso's attendees, acquaintances who frequented the Saturday evening were Ferdinand Olivier, Picasso's mistress, George Braque. Braque and Picasso were the first Cubist painters, right? André Derain, a painter, Marc Jacob, Guillaume Apollinaire. He was a poet and a painter, right? Apollinaire and Marie Laurencin, artist and Apollinaires' mistress. Her painting is very beautiful, very unique, right? The figures in the painting look like beautiful dolls. And Marie Laurencin, Henri Rousseau. Did you see his painting? I think one of his paintings is being shown at the art museum, at the museum of the museum of National Museum of Korea, right now, right? 국립미술관, right? Henri Rousseau and Joseph Stella. Okay. Let's look at her style, literary style. Stein's writing can be placed in three categories. Thematic works, best illustrated by the making of Americans. Popularized writings such as the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas. By publishing this work, she made a lot of money, right? The autobiography of Alice B. Toklas. And if you read this biography, you'll see a lot of the stories about the artist in Paris, right? Speech writing, more accessible autobiographical writing of later years, of which, typical quotes are, rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. Do you understand? Rose is a rose. Is a rose is a rose, right? Out of kindness comes redness, and out of rudeness comes a rapid same question. Out of an eye comes research. Out of selection comes painful cattle. Okay, do you understand it? These stream of consciousness experiments, rhythmical essays or portraits, were designed to evoke the excitingness of pure being and can be seen as the literature's answer to Cubism. So it's a Cubist literature, Cubist writing. Plasticity, like, and collage. Many of the experimental works, such as Tender Buttons, have since been interpreted by critics as a feminist reworking of patriarchal language. These works were well received by avant-garde critics, but did not initially receive mainstream success. Despite Stein's work on automatic writing with William James, writing with she did not see her work as automatic, but as an excess of consciousness. Though Stein collected Cubist paintings, especially those of Picasso, the largest visual influence on the work is that of Cézanne. Do you know Cézanne? Paul Cézanne. You can see one Paul Cézanne at the National Museum Gallery right now. It's being shown. Particularly, he influenced her ideas of equality, distinguished from universality. The whole field of the canvas is important. Okay, the whole field of the canvas is important. Everything important. So, in a portrait, the curtains in the background is important as the figure in an Impressionist painting. Okay? Okay, essay, Time and Space in Yeats and Stein. Reading Tender Button. Your handout, page part 3. Go to Stein's Tender Buttons consists of 3 divisions: object, food, rooms. Firstly, object has 58 objects with the same name of object in each, but some, such as a frightful release, more, the time to eat, in between, it was black, black took. Secondly, in food, before beginning the story, she kindly gives a table of contents. And the table of content is as follows. Roast beef, mutton, breakfast, sugar, cranberries, milk, eggs, apple, tails, lunch, cups, rhubarb, single, fish, cake, custard, potatoes, asparagus, butter, end of summer. Is it food? End of summer, right? Sausages, celery, veal, vegetable cooking, chicken, pastry, cream, cucumber, dinner, dining, eating, salad, sausage, salmon, orange, cocoa, and clear soup and orange and oatmeal, salad dressing, and then artichoke. The center in the table. That's right. And thirdly, rooms has just paragraphs, 84 paragraphs in it. A big question I have now: how to read it? How to read it is a big question. As in Yeats, Stein's Tender Button reads wonderfully from spatial and temporal perspectives. Temporally, it is like music. Spatially, it consists of verbal still lifes. Stein is like Cézanne. She was one of the earliest collectors of Cézanne, when none seemed to have understood Cézanne, not to mention appreciate them. In terms of space, Stein and Cézanne fill and vacate the space in the picture, right? Stein and Cézanne fill and vacate the space in the picture. Did you see the painting of the Mont Blanc, Mont Blanc? It's beautiful, right? Right. Compared with them, Matisse vacates his canvas while painting. Picasso mostly fills the canvas with cubic things, cubes, but sometimes concentrates on vacating it. Though I do not deal with all of the suggestions below, I think it is possible to make sense out of Stein if you attempt to do these things. Right? When you read his works, try this. Okay, first, try to feel with the near. Try to feel with the near the transparent sense for an incessant flow of non sequiturs, nonsensical things, right? Non sequitur. And to measure how it flows in a temporal dimension, how it flows. Or you can do this. Gaze upon the shape of words, paragraphs, so they compare and contrast silently to form a sense of spatial dimensions. Okay, 3. Focus on the verbs and their tenses and how they feel to your oral, tactile senses, how they make transparent sense or non sequiturs in temporal, spatial spheres. And fourth, see what is seen as a still life, right? A collage that is a non sequitur, do not seek meanings in it. Stein makes sense, as in still lives. Is it one-dimensional, or does it give cubic dimensions? Okay, 5. Temporal and spatial poses in our writing hold the key to transparent glimpses of truth and bliss in the poses. Gaze upon the mixing of the transparent non sequiturs with colors and sizes. Compare them to make momentary glimpses of sense and truth. Does it give a spatial feeling? And another thing you can do is pay attention to the pronouns, the prepositions, comparisons, verbal elements. These support the HYU's narrative structure of non sequitur as sense. To the relationship that forms spatial feelings. And finally, you can do this. Curiously, traditional critical approaches do not help the reader with reading Tenderbottom, but defamiliarization, which is one of the tenets of formalists and new critics, whose claim lies in the self-sufficiency of a poem as an artifact. Defamiliarization, right? It is a literary term. Everything is familiar, right? And you get bored, right? When you look at the same thing, you get bored. So you make it unfamiliar to look fresh. So that's the idea of defamiliarization. It's a literary term, right? So Tenderbottom is an artifact and self-sufficient, but seems to defy formalist tenets. Still, as seen above, her work is from itself a still life. And when Stein is doing, what Stein is doing in the work is to defamiliarize all things in it, but for the purpose of making sense. So, what is then the novella Tenderbottoms? Is it work of literary still life? It is a work of still life. It is there to give us a chance to contemplate, enjoy, making sense out of HYU's narrative structure of non sequiturs as sense. This poetic novella has been ridiculed and admired. Try to read it as you used to read other novels. Eventually you will read it for sound, for one thing, then it reads beautifully. Though there appear and disappear some momentary glimpses of meaning in the narrative. If you seek a conventional meaning, it will only tire and exasperate you. The correct way to read this, rather than you read the work, let the work read you, right? Let the work read you, right? There appear glimpses of images, impressive words, and wordings, comparisons, insights, in the midst of flowing sentence after sentence rolling on, repeated in curiously musical ways. Since Emily Dickinson, she is classical compared with Stein. Emily Dickinson, American poet, 19th century American poet, nobody could understand her, right? And only a few works, a few poems were published in her lifetime. But today, all the critics recognize her as the most important poet of the last century, and very beautiful. Right? Since Emily Dickinson, I have never read any who make sense the way she does, except Picasso. We have read Picasso's poetry, right? Years ago, I read Picasso poetry, though at the time I did not know that Stein had been his influence. He was influenced by Stein. Also, Stein's writing was influenced by Picasso. So mutual influence, right? Besides, to modernists who have long seen and appreciate abstract painting, it is not so strange to read Stein. It is best to listen to what the author Gerstein says about Tenderbottom, but her editor and a friend say about it. Carl Vechten, right? Carl van Vechten and F.W. Dupy seems to have known Stein and the work well, and Stein must have known how her writing, like Tender Button, was to be received by the reader. The 1990 reprint has 3 interesting pieces of writing. A message from Gertrude Stein, dated Paris, June 18, 1946, general introduction by Dupy, dated February 1916, and the Stein song by Carl Vechten, dated New York, April 1846, with a postscript. My introduction to this volume was written and sent to the printer a little over 3 months before Gertrude Stein's death in Paris, July 27, 1946. But I feel that it is wiser, for both sentimental and practical reasons, let it stand unchanged. So the book, before the book was published, Stein died. But Carl Vechten did not change his introduction to a book. Stein wrote a message from Gertrude Stein about 1 month before her death. She begins, "I always wanted to be historical. From almost a baby on, I felt that way about it. And Carl was one of the earliest ones that made me be certain that I was going to be. When I was around 14, I used to love to say to myself, those awful lines of George Eliot, right? Poet. May I be one of those immortal something or other? How terribly exciting each of these were. First, there was the doing of them, the intense feeling that they made sense. Then the doubt, and then each time over again, the intense feeling that they did not make sense. It was Carl who arranged for the printing of Tender Buttons. And the publisher, Carl, was certain with Edmund Wilson, a great critic scholar, that she has personality of unmistakable originality and distinction. He, as editor, begins his Stein song, an introduction to her selected writing. Gertrude Stein rings bells, loves baskets, wears a handsome waistcoat. She has a tenderness for green glass, and buttons have tenderness for her. In the matter of fans, you can only compare her with a motion picture star in Hollywood, and 3 generations of young writers have sat at her feet. She has influenced without coddling them. In her own time, she is a legend, and in her own country, she is with honor. Keys to scared doors have been presented to her, and she understands how to open them. She writes books for children, plays for actors, librettos for operas. Each of them is one, and for her, a rose is a rose, and how? And Dupy's general introduction is short but full of insights into Stein's personality and work. He quotes Stein's biographer, John Malcolm, brilliant insight into a way of writing. Language is plastic, but its plasticity must be informed and determined by the philosophy, or at least by the information it conveys. In earlier works, Gertrude Stein operated under this injunctions naturally, but as he continued, attraction to painting led her to wish for the same plastic freedom for literature, and eventually to write as though literature were endowed with such freedom. The painter, said George Braque, the Cubist painter, George Braque, the painter knows things by sight, and the writer, who knows them by name, profits by a prejudice in his favor. This was the profit Gertrude Stein threw away. And Dupy declares, all this applies to Dr. Stein, and further says that, not as in Eliot and Joyce, it is not possible for the reader to look for meanings and values following the principles for association in Tender Buttons. She is neither practicing automatic writing nor any literary convention like surrealism. She is beyond any modern ways. Juppie, however, suggests that we read aloud. Certain passages in, say, Tender Buttons do make effect, especially if read in the company of people prepared to laugh. To the ear, and it is lent freely to a given passage, the contrast stands out between, on the one hand, the perpetual flow of non sequiturs in the passage. On the other, the air of conviction conveyed by the very definite words, the pregnant pauses, the past summary phrases. This is this, it is surely cohesive, it is not the same, and the mingling of apparent conviction with transparent nonsense throughout such a passage takes on its own kind of momentary sense, giving rise, if the reader is lucky, to a wondering laugh. As one of her pet phrases suggests, it shows shine. Does it also show Stein? If so, reading these tongue-twisting words aloud helps to bring the pun to light. So, too, with the occasional rhymes and jingles strewn through his prose, they also come alive better when spoken. Now, let us face part of Tender Buttons so that we can feel with an ear the transparent sense for an incessant flow of non sequiturs and to measure how it flows in a temporal and spatial dimension. No matter how you read it, it will not make sense if your method is conventional. Of Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons that consists of 3 divisions: object, food, rooms. Here is the first thing in food. Okay, it's part of food. Roast beef. In the inside, there is sleeping. In the outside, there is reddening. In the morning, there is meaning. In the evening, there is feeling. In the evening, there is feeling. In feeling, anything is resting. In feeling, anything is mounting. In feeling, there is resignation. In feeling, there is recognition. In feeling, there is recurrence. And entirely mistaken, there is pinching. All the standards have steamers, and all the curtains have bed linens. All the yellow has discrimination. All the circle has circling. This makes sand. This makes sand. This makes sense. This makes sand. Very well. Certainly the length is thinner, and the rest, the round rest, has a long summer. To shine. Why not shine? To shine, to station, to enlarge, to hurry the measure. All this means nothing if there is singing. If there is singing, then there is the resumption. The change the dart, not change the dirt. Okay, change the dart, not change the dirt. Okay, the change the dart, not change dirt means there is no beefsteak. Not to have that is no obstruction. It is so easy to exchange meaning. It is so easy to see the difference. The difference is that a plain resource is not entangled with thickness. It does not mean that thickness shows such cutting. It does not mean that metal is useful and a cow absurd. It does not mean that there are tears. This is only beautiful to read and savor the feel of the prose, but never to make sense the way you used to. Before closing, I would say a few words about Stein's style. Stein was not that Stein we read in a later work. She was to change drastically. Reading her first work, the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, we learned that she was a careful writer. On publication, this novel became a bestseller. She made a lot of money. This is fascinating read for anyone who is interested in Paris and writers knowledge there in the early 1900s. Particularly, Stein paints a lot of portraits of artists and writers. She wrote a lot of biographies about artists, which you will never see elsewhere, including that of Picasso, Matisse, Laurent Saint Apollinaire. The narrator is I, and Stein is she spoken about in the third person, but the author is not Toklas, but Stein. The story sounds detached and calm, but is recording all the minute details of the life of every writer and artist. A fantastic book. So I suggest you get this book and read it, right? If you want to learn about the background stories of artists and writers. Okay, and let's go to the poem. Okay, Tender Button has three sections, three parts: objects, food, rooms. And I'm going to read part of the section, objects, and it's called a box. A box. Out of kindness comes redness. Out of redness comes rapid, same question. Out of an eye comes research. Out of selection comes painful cattle. So then the order is that a white way of being round is something suggesting of pain. And is it disappointing? It is not. It is so rudimentally to be analyzed and see a fine substance strangely. It is so earnest to have a green point, not to red, but to point again. And another piece, a piece of coffee, a piece of coffee. This poem is rather long, okay? Just listen. More of a double, a place in no new table. A single image, not splendor. Dirty is yellow. A sign of more, it not mentioned. A piece of coffee is not a detainer. The remembrance to yellow is dirtier and distincter. The clean mixture is whiter and not coal color, never more coal color than altogether. Things like that, right? Okay, there is another box, another poem called Box in the same section, Box. A big box is handily made of what is necessary to replace any substance. Suppose an example is necessary. The plainer it is made, the more reason there is for some outward recognition that there is a result. A box is made sometimes than to see to it neatly and to have the hole stopped and make it necessary to use paper. The custom which is necessary when a box is used and taken is that a large part of the time there are three which have different connections. The one is on the table, the two are on the table, the three are on the table. The one is the same size as is shown by the cover being longer. The other is different. There is more cover that shows it. The other is different, and that makes the corners have the same shade. The 8 are in singular arrangement to make 4 necessary. Okay, let's go to the food section. Food. Okay, food, okay. One of the poem is called Potatoes, and it's a single line, 4 words actually, 4 words in it. Potatoes, real potatoes cut in between. Right? Real potatoes cut in between is its whole point. Real potatoes cut in between. Imagine. Potatoes cut in between. It's essential, right? It's referring to something, right? Womanhood. And another poem. Chicken. Okay. Actually, there are 4 poems. Chicken, 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 right? Chicken. Pheasant and chicken. Chicken is a peculiar bird. The whole poem, right? pheasant and chicken. Chicken is a peculiar bird, and second chicken is, alas, the dirty word, alas, the dirty third, alas, the dirty third, alas, the dirty bird. That's the poem, right? And another chicken poem, chicken. Alas, the doubt in case of more to go to say, what it is crash? What is it? Mean potato loaves. And finally, chicken. Stick, stick, call them. Stick, 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 tea, sticking. Sticking with a chicken. Sticking in an extra succession, sticking in. You like it? It's funny, right? Okay, and I'm going to introduce your reactions to this poem. And 4 people. 유정현. 유정현. Tender Button is by far the most unusual pieces of literature I have ever read. Though much of what the poem actually means and the context of each subheading and object in the poem does not make any sense at all, I found a certain sense of rhythm in the poem as a whole. Stein uses various techniques of rhythm, such as repetition, alliteration throughout the poem, even breaking down the barriers of grammar to do so. Looking through each of the sentences and each of the objects in the poem, it seems that Stein was trying to displace our relation to everyday objects, defamiliarize, right? And juxtaposing new ideas and new objects onto them, creating a whole new different idea and meaning of these objects. Cubism, yeah? Cubism literature, Cubist literature. Though sometimes it seems that Stein has just written a barrage of words that may or may not relate to the object she is talking about, the unexpected rhythm of all makes it truly uncertain whether these words have any meaning at all, and the words themselves, like painting with the use of interconnecting, contradictory, and nonsense words, is meaning in itself by its own self. Good essay, right? Oh. 민선호? When I first read this text, I thought it is almost impossible to understand its meaning. Each paragraph has a small title, but it seems that they have no relation at all. For instance, for a title like a petticoat, she says that a light white, a disgrace, an ink spot, a rosy charm. It is not a definition or explanation or analysis. Her emotion toward the object. Instead, I assume that Stein has just written down images while staring at an object or food in front of her. Those images are not connected with each other in a logical way. Moreover, they do not contain any poetic lesson or sensitivity. They merely exist as a neutral statement. Okay? 이준성? In rooms, one of the objects, right? Section, right? Rooms. Gertrude Stein redefines words based on their origins of words and an analysis of the syllables. She chooses words for their prosody and puts them side by side in order to crop the common extensions. She believes that the words have lots of their expressive force and uses an unlikely combination of words to redefine each word. This poem can also be seen as a reworking of a man-centered language from a feminist viewpoint. Okay. And 석정민? When I get a glimpse of Tender Button, it looks easy. After reading the first section in Object, I willingly changed my thought in a radical way. Now, it seems like a series of nonsenses. Stein says something to me, and continually, but I can't understand what she says. Almost, she seems to say almost nothing. I already have a similar experience in that. Okay. When I read his poems, I underwent the same kind of pain. Of course, I was confused when I met Yeats' automatic writing, too. However, I can say Stein's work is the hardest. Okay, I agree. Okay, we'll take a 10 minutes break.